Star Wars Dark Forces is a speed game I've spent a lot of time with over the years, and is one I always recommend to people who are looking for cool FPS game speedruns. It's fast-paced, has some cool tech, is fairly easy to follow, and has very few dull moments. And for what it's worth, the run itself is satisfying for rewarding consistency and the overall game just feeling good. What's even more interesting to note is that the run is impressive and has some cool speedrun elements, but overall the game isn't really broken or dependent on glitches in order to be fast. Sure, some things seem out of the ordinary realm of casual play, but there's nothing here that's inherently glitchy or severely game-breaking. That is, at least for most of the game. Despite all this, there is still one level that is fundamentally broken, completed not only fast, but in a way that completely goes against the logic of the game's design. A level that cuts out so much that you don't even have to leave the first area. That, my friends, is going to be the topic of discussion today, where we will be looking at, explaining, and understanding Star Wars Dark Forces' most broken level, Imperial City. Now, before we get into that, we have to start by talking a little bit about Dark Forces game design, specifically how missions work. You see, Dark Forces is a little bit different than other FPS games at the time. Most FPS game level structure and game plan was based around exploring maps, hitting switches, finding keys, and then hitting some sort of switch or exit trigger, and that would be the end of the level. Rinse and repeat until you get to the end of the game. Dark Forces works a little bit different. Each level has a mission structure that's based on objective completion. This often involves finding an item, activating certain things, fighting certain enemies, and so on and so forth. Completing these is what causes the mission to be complete, in which you get a prompt where you can choose at any time to move on to the next mission. Some missions will simply be considered complete once all the objectives are finished, some require you to backtrack to a pickup area that becomes active only once the other objectives are finished, and then you will get your mission complete prompt. The big takeaway from this you need to know is that every single level requires you to finish the objectives in order for the level to be considered complete. Even if you do the objectives out of order, they all have to be completed. Using cheats to do objectives in a completely unintended order will still require you to do these objectives, although sometimes the audio cues won't be correct, which is kind of amusing. This remains the case for every single level except Imperial City. Now it's time to get into the level itself. I'm going to show you what the level looks like in the run, and then explain each piece of how it all comes together. The trick used at this point is fairly well known, but for those who may not know it, it's important that you see it for yourself, and for those of you who are familiar with it, it'll be a refresher and help with getting into explaining why this happens. And just like that, the level is over, and we now have two moldy crows. To people who have never played this game, this might be confusing, as it looks like we're just blowing up mines and the level ends. And if this was an old Nintendo game, more than likely that would be enough to explain this. But there is a bit more to this, so strap in because you guys are about to get a very detailed lecture on this level. The objectives of Imperial City are broken down like this. You must find a specific building, decode a card into a data tape, collect said data tape, and then head back to your ship. Getting the tape requires a bit of deep level exploration and a very frustrating switch puzzle. And once you get the tape and start heading back, eventually you'll get a message from your mission operator, Jan Ors. The message makes it sound like she's in trouble, and when you get back to the beginning, instead of an escape, you have to fight Boba Fett. A fight that is very annoying. Once he's dead, the moldy crow reappears, and the mission is now complete. So yeah, this seems to fulfill the requirements for a mission completion in the game. So how are we really bypassing all of that? Well, let's take a quick look at the start and end of the level again. They look more or less similar minus the presence of the ship, but a closer look will show that something has changed when Boba Fett appears. The back wall is not there, revealing a hidden area where Boba Fett's hiding. The wall moves once you've hit specific objective triggers leading up to getting back to the ship, giving the impression that Boba Fett just shows up, but he's really just hiding here at the beginning all this time. With this information, you can gather that what is happening is in the run, we're killing Boba Fett at the very beginning of the level. So let's talk about how we're doing that next. Now, Dark Forces is a really well put together game, about as well put together as a FPS game on a 2.5D game engine in 1995 can be. However, despite this, it's not perfect and there's still exploitations that do exist in the game. One of the most interesting and useful exploitations has to do with splash damage, and specifically how splash damage works around movable walls and doors. See, attacks that have splash damage have a set radius of damage that will vary depending on how far or close to the center of the explosion something is. In the case with most walls, the splash damage won't really do anything after a certain point as the wall intercepts it. However, with the case of doors and moving walls, the splash damage continues to extend as normal. This allows you to do damage to anything on the other side of a movable wall or door. There's also similar exploitation with these types of doors that involves using the alt fire mode for thermal detonators that allows you to basically clip them to the other side. In theory, you could also use this against Boba Fett in this scenario in Imperial City. However, we want something with a big splash and does good damage in order to do enough damage to kill Boba Fett quickly. At this point in the run, mines are going to be the best option to do that. Now, placing mines and blowing up the boss seems really easy, and realistically, it kind of is. However, while it is easy, there is still some minor issues that stop this fight from being consistently lightning fast. For one, Boba is behind a giant wall, so we can't see where he is, and since his movement and behavior can be very random, it is hard to tell where he is at any given time, because once he takes damage, he starts moving. The best thing you can use for judgment is audio cues to see if he's audible on one side or the other, but even then, that isn't always going to help out perfectly. There have been a number of methods for trying to make the Boba Fett kill consistent, however, none of them have ever been able to be 100% consistent. Even the newer setup I use, while most of the time is fast, still has a chance to not work perfectly. So this creates some variation in how long it can take for the kill to happen. Regardless though, killing him still enables the level to end right here at the very beginning, and I think it's time to explain why this happens and why it's really unlike any other level skips in the run. So explaining how the skip actually works is a little bit weird, and admittedly, I had to reach out for some answers about the source code in order to try and figure out the best way to explain this. So I want to give a huge shout outs to the DF21 community and the people who I reached out to that gave answers about why this stuff works. And while I'm on the topic, I will say if you do like Dark Forces and you want a community where you can discuss different aspects of the game or check out unique content and custom missions and assets and things like that, highly recommend checking out DF21. It's a pretty cool website. I'm going to leave a link to that website in the description so you can check that out. Anyways, we know killing Boba Fett is something you're supposed to do at the very end of the level, and doing so early on makes it so that you can end the level early. Which does not make any sense because, as we mentioned earlier, levels can't be considered complete unless every objective is completed, even if it's out of order. So why is this one an exception? Let's take a deeper look. What may not be immediately visible about the level ending is that it isn't just Boba dying. While the Moldy Crow comes in order to trigger the ending quickly, runners will rapidly press the use key inside of the main arena, which will cause the other objective completion audio cues to happen rapidly. And then eventually we will see the prompt for mission complete. The reason this works has to do with how this section is coded. There's a bit that goes into it, but I'll do my best to summarize it in a way that everyone can understand. This area in the beginning of the level actually has a trigger inside of it that counts towards objective completion. This trigger area only becomes active once Boba Fett is dead. There's a couple of things like this throughout the game where the triggers become active after certain conditions. The intended thing is that they want you to re-enter or exit the area after he's been defeated in case Boba Fett manages to leave that area at any given point, which, believe me, is very possible because of how much he moves. However, there's one piece of code that's omitted that sets a condition for how the trigger can be activated, and by default, it acts so that any sort of interaction will activate it. So because of this, you can exit and re-enter, or in the case of the speedrun, use the use key in order to more or less rapidly activate the trigger, which in turn cycles through the objective tracker until it hits the point where every objective is considered complete, even if the objectives haven't been. This oversight is unique only to this level level, and to be honest, it's an oversight I can't imagine the developers would have ever anticipated. But because of these unique circumstances and this being an end trigger that can be activated so early, this completely ignores the typical logic of how the levels are designed, thus making this the most broken level in the game. It's not the fastest level, that goes to Narshada, and while some may say because of that Narshada is the most broken, it's still completing what the level wants you to do. Just cuts the work in between to get there. Whereas with Imperial City, you're completely circumventing everything you have to do in the level. Imperial City is truly an anomaly in the general scope of Dark Forces any percent. The exploit we talked about is also used in All Secrets too to help save a large chunk of backtracking after all the secrets have been discovered. It is the one level that completely ignores the rules and logic of the game's design, and it's all really because of an omission in the code that was very likely unexpected to be exploited like it is. The game as a whole has a lot of really cool tech, shortcuts, and other neat pieces of speed tech, but that's a video for another time. Anyways guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully it was insightful. If you like this, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as I've got plenty more other videos like this related to Dark Forces and other old PC games planned for the near future. Also make sure to follow me on Twitch if you haven't to catch all my content that I do live, and follow me on Twitter for updates. In any case, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Or rest of your week. Maybe both.